Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the Rustic Von Lodge. And it's Sunday, so it's time for the Sunday Penguin. Now, last week on the Sunday Penguin, I did what everybody else on BookTube was doing, which is the top 5 English novels. Everybody was all doing that last week. So I thought, this week I'm going to do a sequel. I'll do my top 5 novels in translation. And next week, I'll do my top 5 ancient works. Just for fun. So this week it's novels, though. It's novels in translation. My top 5. I'm not saying they're the greatest of all time or anything like that. I'm just saying they're my top 5. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, this will probably be no surprise. There are probably no surprises here. But I'm doing it anyway, because, why not? My top 5 novels in translation. What could they be? Okay. Going 5 to 1 as we do in these lists. Number 5 is French. It's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Is this really one of the top? Yes, it's in my top 5. I love this book. I like Jules Verne an awful lot. And I think this is the best Jules Verne book. Well, at least of the books that I've read. I've read actually quite a few. And this is my favorite. It's almost the perfect classic adventure novel with a bunch of old-timey science thrown in. The story of Captain Nemo and his submarine, the Nautilus. It's fascinating. Captain Nemo is a fascinating character. This book, it's a very rereadable book, I found. I always love to come back to Captain Nemo and the Nautilus. And I really like this Penguin edition of it. When these books from Jules Verne were originally published, or originally translated, I should say, the translations weren't so great. So some of those older translations, a lot of stuff was cut. A lot of the translating was inaccurate. So as entertaining as a lot of those old translations might have been, and a lot of them were pretty entertaining, the translations themselves were not great. So it's good to get a more modern translation, and this one is excellent. Who did the translation of this? This was David Coward who did the translation of this, and one of the reasons that this is so fantastic is because it has some of the original illustrations in it. In fact, I think it has all the original illustrations. And the same is true if you get just the regular Black Spine Classic version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. This is their hardcover, cloth-bound hardcover edition. But if you get if you get the Black Spine Classic, same thing. So I would recommend it. I recommend this book, and I definitely recommend this edition. The Penguin edition is excellent. So there's that. Let's go to number 4. What could it be? This is one of my very favorite novels of all time. I love this novel, and this is Les Mis, or The Miserables, by Victor Hugo. It's very long. It's famously long. So you'll often find in other editions, you will find abridged editions, versions of this that are much, much shorter. Now, famously, Victor Hugo does go off on some very, very long tangents in this that have nothing to do with the story, but he felt like, this stuff should be in there, and it is his book, after all. But you will find many editions, including a previous Penguin edition, where that stuff is either just cut out or just cut out and put in as an appendix or something. But this version is a complete version. I have not read this version yet. I read another complete version. Was it from Signet? I can't remember. But I read another complete version and I loved it. I'm very much looking forward to this one because it has such a great reputation. This translation is by Christine Doniger. And this, I hear, is the translation to get. The novel is fantastic. Great characters, great story, very melodramatic, but fantastic. It's earned its reputation, this book. It took me a long time to read this the first time I read it. It took me longer than most books to read. And I'm not sure why. I could have just been working a lot. But it is awful long. But it's so worth it. This book is so worth your time. It's really good. I am an admirer of Victor Hugo, and I love this book. So there you go. I'll stop talking about that one now. Let's get to the next one, the third book, number 3. This should be no surprise at all, of course. This is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Count of Monte Cristo, fantastic book. One of the greatest novels of revenge ever told. It took a while to get revenge. This is another French book. Hey, they wrote some good books in France. So, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Like I said, brilliant novel of revenge. Very episodic because of the way it was serialized in the newspapers at the time. Huge. It's huge. Once again, you can find a lot of editions of this which are abridged. I advise you not to get those abridged editions and to read the whole thing. Read the whole thing. Just read the whole thing. You know, it's fantastic. Now, again, this is a case where this is not the version that I read, and that I do intend on reading this one. I read the edition that was published by the Oxford World's Classics, which was an unabridged edition. Or was it? Because since then I've heard that this Penguin edition, and this one was translated by Robin Buss? Yeah, Robin Buss. I hear that this edition is actually the only unabridged edition. Like, there's stuff in here that's not in the Oxford. So, yeah. Robin Buss. Get this translation, apparently. I haven't read it yet. I've heard great things about it. But the novel itself, it's magnificent. I've only read this book once, if you can believe it. I've only read this book once, so I'm due for a reread of this book. When? I don't know, because it's giant. Will it be next year? I've got some other stuff coming up next year regarding giant books, including the next one. Now, you've heard me talk about this next one very often, and probably the only surprise here is that it's not number 1, and that is War and Peace. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Hey, it's a book that's not French, it's Russian. I've talked about this, I feel like, a million times. I love this book. This book is great. This book is magnificent. I have read this translation from Penguin by Anthony Briggs, and it's an excellent translation. I've read this book, 3 times? I think I've read this book 3 times. Yeah. And I've read 3 different translations, I think. And this was the last one that I read. Or did I read this book twice? I can't remember. I think it was 3 times. Anyway, this was the last time I read it was this translation, which was a few years ago by Anthony Briggs. Excellent translation. Really, really good, War and Peace. Yes, it's got 1 billion characters. Yes, it's huge. But it's magnificent. Now, it could be a cheat to have it on this list because Leo Tolstoy himself did not consider this a novel. It is a fictional narrative, but it's also a fictional narrative that's kind of wrapped in with a bunch of philosophy, particularly at the end. However, it does read like a novel, mostly. Mostly it does. And so pretty much everybody considers this a novel. And so I'm going to consider it a novel, no matter what Leo Tolstoy thought of his own book. So War and Peace, you can't not include this one. You can't. It's War and Peace. You got to. Now, the next one is one I don't think I've actually done a Sunday Penguin on for some reason, and I think this is this next one, my number 1. on this list is probably the greatest novel ever written. Probably. And it's this one. This is Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Brothers Karamazov. The Brothers Karamazov. The Brothers K, for short. Fyodor Dostoevsky. And this novel is magnificent. It succeeds spectacularly on every level as a novel. It's deep. There's a bunch of really important themes in this book. And as a narrative, it just is great. It's a great story with some magnificent characters. It's a book you will never forget. It's a book with a bunch of stuff in it that makes you think. And it's just a gripping story. And it's got, like, pretty much the worst dad ever in it. Bad dad in this one. Is it just a murder mystery? No, it is so much more than just a murder mystery. It is a tale of crime, but more than that, it is Brothers Karamazov. And this translation is an older translation, as you can see. It's one of the older Penguins. And this is translated by David Macduff. And I have read this translation. This was not the first translation that I read. I read a more modern translation first before I read this one. But I enjoyed this one quite a bit. I think this is a pretty good translation. And I don't know if this is still the Penguin translation, although I think that it is. Let me know if I am wrong. But no matter what translation you get, probably it's going to be awful good. So this one is my choice for number one. It is just a wonderful book. It's number one. It's number one, guys. Number one. Okay. There you go. My top 5 novels in translation. I guess that's all I have to say this week about my Sunday Penguin. Catch me next week when I will be back, probably, at Stately Vaughan Manor, and I will talk about ancient books, some ancient stuff. What are the top 5 ancient books? What are they? You probably know number 1 because I talk about it all the time. So anyway, I will catch you next time.